Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here for our first Brisk Innovators webinar, where ideas turn into action. Today, we're talking about developing a GenAI adoption plan with Amanda Bickerstaff. AI is moving quickly in schools, and district leaders are being asked to lay the groundwork, often without a clear roadmap. In this session, we're going to be looking at a framework grounded in AI literacy, policy, and guidelines, giving leaders the clarity and confidence to lead districts into the future of AI. I'm Elizabeth Bostwick, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Brisk Teaching. I've been in education myself for over 18 years, and I'm passionate about helping schools implement AI in meaningful and impactful ways. For those of you who are new to Brisk, I'm just going to share a little bit today that Brisk is an AI-powered education platform that supports teachers, students, and schools at every stage of learning, from planning and instruction to feedback and student practice. Within Brisk, you will see that you have access to Brisk Next, and that's really our AI hub on the web that creates resources for preparing, engaging, and assessing students in their learning. You can even create bundled resources to share directly with students. You also have access to the Brisk extension that's in-the-moment support, really within tools that teachers already use. Also, you'll find that there's Brisk Boost. This is our student-facing, safe AI that allows educators to be able to share activities with students and then let students interact back to be able to deepen their learning and engagement too. So together, these really do form the full Brisk experience, helping teachers to personalize instruction, save time, and keep learning moving forward, all while giving schools and districts a safe, scalable way to bring AI into the classroom. So today, we're going to be diving in just to all the things of when we talk about AI literacy and staff readiness. And I'm so excited to be able to turn it over and share Amanda Bickerstaff in her voice today. Just a quick introduction for Amanda. Amanda is one of the top voices helping districts navigate AI adoption. Amanda is the co-founder and CEO for AI for Education, a former high school biology teacher and ed tech executive with over 20 years of experience in the education sector. She has a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities that AI can offer, and she's really committed to helping schools and teachers maximize their potential through the ethical and equitable adoption of AI. So we are so honored to have Amanda joining us today and really leading us through the conversation of how we can lay the foundation of AI literacy and staff readiness. Thank you for joining us today, Amanda.
Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. I am excited to be here with you all today. This is all we do, AI literacy all the time. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about AI literacy, some like what we consider AI literacy, as well as starting to think through a roadmap. But I just appreciate the time, Elizabeth. It's really great to see you and to hear a lot about how Brisk has really changed. I met Armand, the co-founder and CEO of Brisk, back about 2.5 years ago. And so I was saying to Elizabeth that, Armand was on one of our early webinars. So it's fun to be able to do this with you all. And for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Amanda. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. I think we're just about as old as ChatGPT, a little bit younger, but we're never more than probably 12 to 24 hours away from working directly with schools and systems on AI adoption, whether that is AI literacy, guideline development, strategic vision, and now more and more also around strategic implementation and teaching and learning. So excited to be here. So should I just go for it, Elizabeth?
Awesome. Yes. Well, and I was telling Amanda before we went live, I was just listening to a podcast she was on. So just keep in mind that you're going to be able to connect with Amanda on LinkedIn. Also check out their website of AI for Education. And you can always search for podcasts and be able to learn a little bit more. But yeah, I'm going to turn it right over to Amanda, and I'm going to let Amanda just really guide us through what it looks like if we're laying the foundation for literacy and staff readiness. But I'm really just excited to look at how we can define AI literacy for teachers and leaders, and of course, why it's so important.
Well, first of all, I see some familiar faces in the chat, but do feel free if you have a question to drop it into the Q&A. Just know that I'm going to be looking the whole time. So I'm going to share my screen, and you may have seen this before. If you follow our work, you probably have seen this before, which is where we really think about like AI literacy. We think about what's the noisiest conversations on AI in schools today. I don't know if anybody's heard this. Maybe Elizabeth, you've heard this, but AI is for cheating. This is what it is. And if there's really not going to be any positives to this because of how easy it is today for students to have, to be academically dishonest. And it's really interesting because it is so immediate how quickly it became the primary conversation around student use of AI. And I'll just give an example. So ChatGPT was released in November of 2022. New York City schools, which is the largest school district in the world, in the country, 1 to 1.1 million students, banned ChatGPT in January. So less than 6 weeks after ChatGPT even came on the scene, there was an immediate recognition that this could have a negative impact on young people. And what's happened is there's a lot of rhetoric around AI use. Even like building student AI literacy could lead to more cheating in our schools. And what we want to say is that we absolutely know that cheating is happening. We also know that cheating was happening before generative AI. Like genuinely, like pretty sure that we can all agree that we all knew someone that was a great cheater when we were in high school or middle school or college, way before ChatGPT. And so one of the things that we think a lot about AI literacy is just being able, especially as educators and leaders, and even students, because students are internalizing that rhetoric as well, to take a step back and start looking at really what's going to be happening more and more around AI. And so this is where I think it's important for us. This is our metaphor. We do love a metaphor here at AI for Education. But the idea of that, if we just focus only solely on student use and keeping them to like safe and doing the work themselves, we're missing so much of both the potential for positive and the potential for negative. And so what we have to do is it's almost like, can we move to the back of my room and start looking at this in a more comprehensive manner? And so some of the things to consider are that there are lots of real opportunities, and I mean real opportunities in terms of AI. Yeah, so chat is disabled. I'm happy to have the chat on, but that's up to, I'm not Brisk. So if you have questions though, please put them in the Q&A. But for us, like the idea of the opportunity. So for example, the one that probably is the most commonly thought of is productivity gains and efficiency. And I will say that we don't really focus a ton of our work on that because we think that while that is a good opportunity, there's so much more you can do. So I'm going to focus a little more on the ideas of personalized learning. So while I don't think we have a chatbot today that is going to be able to really act as a pedagogical personalized learning tool, and I say pedagogical with underlining, we are starting to see more and more in the work that organizations like Brisk are doing, the big companies like OpenAI and others, all of us are moving into that direction. But I would say that probably more to right now, that's an opportunity, is on-demand feedback. Like today, it's like we actually had a webinar yesterday with Anna Mills talking about this, but like the idea that feedback is a subjective experience that's meant to drive our own thinking, that being able to use tools for feedback can be an amazing opportunity. And so on-demand feedback, also, even though like the idea of assistive technology, AI has always been assistive technology. So think voice to text, text to voice, devices for your nonverbal students, translation devices. Like there are so many opportunities that have always been assistive technology. And so this is where we really have this opportunity to start thinking about the opportunities. For the potential risks that we think a lot about with AI literacy are things like, of course, academic integrity, but also cognitive offload, right? Like the idea of like, it's not that like generative AI has started cheating, but it's made it easier than ever to bypass our own thinking and judgment. And when I say our own, I don't even mean just students. I mean teachers, leaders, professionals. And the idea of cognitive offload in places in which they are integral to our learning, to our practice, our professionalism, our creativity, our human judgment, like that is the thing that's going to be incredibly tricky about generative AI. We call it the easy button. Generative AI is like the easy button for so many things that haven't existed. And if you're not from the US, it was a famous campaign of like, this easy button meant everything was in your fingertips. And that's what we have today with generative AI. Other things that are important are things around deep fakes. Okay, did anybody play with Sora 2 this weekend? Sora 2 is a video generator that was used primarily to create deep fakes of real people and putting them in situations that could be considered misogynistic or out of character. Like, it is pretty wild to see how quickly a tool that was designed as a video tool was used primarily only for deep fakes. Things around bias. You cannot talk about generative AI without talking about bias. It is impossible for a generative system, whether it is generative AI or an application layer, to not have instances of bias built in because of the ways that they are designed and developed and the ways in which the technology works. It's just important to understand that these are always going to be something that, while application layers like Brisk can help to limit those, it's still important to understand that's part and parcel to the actual technology. And then the final thing is one that I think is incredibly important that we don't talk about very much, which is artificial companionship. Artificial companionship, the idea that young people and adults are using AI systems as not just to help them with their homework or work, but also to help them with their, act as a friend or a therapist. One of the things that there is a popular generative AI application called Character AI, and we were doing this in a session very recently. And one of the featured bots was a grandparent bot. And the first thing the grandparent bot said to you is like, "Come and give me a hug. I've missed you so much." And so that these are important conversations to be had. And so for us, AI literacy has to be one in which we really start to think about a comprehensive approach to starting to build the knowledge, skills, and mindsets to be able to use AI in safe, ethical, and effective ways. It's incredibly important for us to think about that this is going to be not just about the way we traditionally think about AI, like literacy. Like, it's about the understanding, of course, right? But it also is about the application and the ways in which we decide when and when not to use these tools and when, how to use them in safe, ethical, and effective ways. So our framework, first of all, this is for everybody. So those of you on the call, if you want, there's so many AI literacy frameworks and definitions. I will say ours is so AI for education because it's really practical. We're really if we can't make it happen in a couple of minutes to understand, then we're not really those type of people. But I would say other ones like the digital literacy framework, AI literacy framework for digital promise is great. There's a one from code.org, Teach AI, and OECD. There are so many great AI literacy frameworks. So you don't have to use ours, but we just feel like ours is a little bit more you could take this today and apply it within your context. And so for us, when we think about building that foundational AI literacy, really thinking through 3 key areas. The first thing is we got to know what it is and isn't. So I'll go back to the definition. What is it? What isn't it? We'll talk about those skills, but also mindsets of use. And so I think that this is really going to be very, very important to think. So the first thing is around safety. And safety is why applications like Brisk are going to be great opportunities because they are built to have an academic lens, right? And especially anything that is student facing. But the idea of personally identifying how to use tools safely, where even if I do have an opportunity to share information about myself, am I doing that without thinking? These tools work best when they have a lot of data about us. And so the idea of being able to understand how and when to use and protect our own data is going to be really important. And so, for example, I'll give you an example. If anybody's ever used a tool called Perplexity, it's a generative search tool. Its terms of service are incredibly dangerous in the sense of everything that you connect or use could be considered monetizable. And so even though it's very common, this is why applications and those that are building safely like Brisk are going to be really important. Is because, but also again, if I have the mindset that I need to actually protect my own data, then I'm going to use these tools more ethically or safely all the time. I would also say the idea of maintaining a healthy balance between AI and human interactions goes 2 ways. One is going to be in the sense of academic integrity or professional integrity. The idea of not giving away all of the hard work to bots to do, but actually making sure that we are absolutely going to be always prioritizing our human judgment and also knowing when and how to use these tools where it doesn't take over what we're doing. And I think it's definitely something that's fairly important for us to understand. The other side is that artificial companionship component. Are we using AI for that kind of validation or support that we would traditionally want from a human? These tools are not thinking, they don't have judgment, they are not in any way, shape, or form going to have a moral compass. And so how can we understand if we start to use these tools in a way that could actually be dangerous to us? So that's what we think about when we think about safety. In terms of ethics, we think very seriously about academic and professional integrity. And I would say that, for example, if I'm a teacher and I'm using a tool, I'm going to talk about how I use the tool to create what I do. If you're using the wonderful feedback, I know you guys just did a big piece on feedback, right? Like actually telling kids how you're using it, show how you do it, compare that with your own feedback. There's so many great ways to think about the ethical component from both lenses. There's also the other ethical issues around things like, IP and copyright. We just talked about deep fakes, things around climate impact and others. Like, are you really understanding the larger ethics around any type of AI use, regardless of if it's going to be generative AI or any other AI system? And then finally, this idea of a do no harm mindset. It's very important for us to always think about what we're putting into the world, even how we're using AI to ensure that we have that mindset. And then the last thing is probably a thing that we find to be most meaningful, especially when working with, let's say, high school to college to adults, is the idea of learning about AI and then learning with AI. And so the idea of coming through and really thinking about, how do I use these tools with intention? But also, it's a technical skill. Prompting is a technical skill. And understanding how to use these tools, evaluate them. I know I see some people, and they're like, hi, Dan. There are other people in the room that I know as well. But yeah, this is the work. I mean, Dan Friedman from Hicksville, this is what we do. This is the focus on this AI literacy framework. But the idea of centering human originality, the opportunity to keep judgment at the core, using the right tool for the right job. There's so many great tools just within Brisk. Like, when do I use and how do I use and how do I actually supplement my own work? Things around prompting strategies, whether that is knowing what you're asking for and being really deliberate about it, as well as always knowing, no matter what you're doing, is that you always have to evaluate a generative AI output. You just always do. It's always important to make sure it's fit for your purpose, that it's got your personality and judgment, that you've evaluated it for, inaccuracies. That's going to be just really important. We talk a lot about the opportunity of AI is not just the prompting, but it's actually the feedback. Actually using these tools to get feedback. But Elizabeth, I saw you coming off. Do you want to say?
I have a question for you too, and just if you could elaborate. I'm going to go back to something you talked about at the beginning, where you mentioned the importance of building this foundational AI literacy and really thinking about students and the fear of using AI for cheating. Because I think when we're talking about working with schools on building AI literacy, that can be a big barrier, right? A lot of times I think schools might right away, if they're thinking AI is for cheating and just to make something more simple for students or doing the work for them, it can right away cause them to maybe avoid going into AI literacy. So I'm curious, how do you support educators who are voicing that concern?
Well, I think the first thing is building educators' AI literacy. I think that the first kind of piece is that, actually having teachers understand what the impact of these tools will be and starting to understand how to use them. Because if you have only used generative AI in a way in which it's like an input-output, and it can be very easy to replace your own thinking, critical thinking, judgment, evaluation, then that's what they think kids use it for, only could use it for. But what we find is that if you are intentional about AI literacy and transparency, that students actually start using the tools more judiciously, more ethically, more meaningfully, and know that in some cases right now that you don't immediately go to AI because AI is actually not that good at this. You're better at this. And I think, yes. And so, Connie, great question about the AI literacy framework. We do have a one-pager. I will give it to Elizabeth to follow up with, but we are going to submit. We are just about ready to actually publish the full paper, which is really exciting, which will go into this. But I do think there's some questions in the chat around students rejecting AI or rejecting teachers' use of AI. And one of the things I think is going to be really important is that like the transparency of this, right? The more that we can be transparent about the why and how we're using it. If a student feels like a teacher is just offloading their own work to AI and it's not making it better and more meaningful to them, they're going to have the same reaction to you using, like to students using it in the same way. And I think that this is where it's kind of that's why we don't have a separate approach to like teacher and student AI literacy. We do talk about applications being different, but we believe it all works together. And I think that what's really great about the conversation that's happening in the chat is that they're like, absolutely, yeah, we're still on the same slide. We're still here. But the idea here is that like we're still at a place where you can learn together in meaningful ways, and everyone should be having these conversations. I think Shauna's point about having conversations about workforce, if your teachers are going to have a really strong aversion to start learning, talking about how AI will impact young people's life in terms of their own careers is a great way to start building buy-in. And that goes also to like the idea of like effective use, but also the kind of safe approach to actually thinking about like what's going to manage going forward. But I know we're gonna come back to like the next piece, and we're shifting into the other part of the session. But I do want to talk about two more things just to kind of go through. And one is that if you're trying to think about what generative AI is pretty good at today, these are the things that we would say that we're most confident in today. And the first is on-demand feedback. Like getting feedback is going to be one because, again, remember, it is subjective and it's really designed. Good feedback is designed to make you think and also to reject. If something that doesn't work for you, then you don't take it, right? You actually can find your path in between. The second is instructional design. It's never been easier in the world for an educator to not just lesson plan, but to design interactive materials, to create videos and images, to rethink the ways in which, we definitely are going to move into thinking about differentiation as well of something that goes from a concept to practice. Things like brainstorming, just in the sense of, being able to like really like use these tools to almost clarify your own thinking, like is something like brainstorming ideas. Generative AI is designed to be creative and is really good at giving you a lot of crazy responses and answers and ideas that you can use to start clarifying what you really want to focus on. Things around like real-time translation is like absolutely is like going to be something that more and more I like new AirPods, for example, are a great example of what's going to be changing, which is that it has real-time translation. Of course, the equity issue of not everyone being able to own, but it's a nice precursor to what's most likely going to become very available, right? The idea that we're going to have the opportunity to have real-time translation, which in places like schools where you have multilingual students and families could have an enormous impact on supporting students in a way that you've never been able to before. And then finally, accessibility. I mean, so many of these tools, you can use these tools through speech only, which starts to open this up for dysgraphic and dyslexic students and adults. There are so many opportunities, even with computer vision, being able to upload an image and analyzing an image for those that are low to no vision. But the idea of accessibility being something that today is becoming more and more capable is something we really like to do. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about before we move into more of the roadmap and the next steps is that there's a lot of question about how AI impacts learning. And so I just want to talk a little bit about this because I know a lot of us are thinking about it. And I'm going to say, from putting on my researcher hat, because we are doing, first of all, everyone, we are doing research right now, which is pretty cool, is that it's so early that I would say that most of the studies on generative AI and learning are very, very basic and just getting started. And some of them have some pretty significant, the research protocols themselves have left something to be designed. And so, so like right now, like I would say that most of the studies right now are really just more indicative. They're not going to be something that I would say rush to, that these are great. And so these are just ones that have become very popular. The first two are ones that have been focused on AI's use with students. GenAI Can Harm Learning was from last year. And I know someone asked for the links. We can share that afterwards. I can share the links to all of these studies. And also, I think, James, we also have on our website, we have a Generative AI studies that has about 50 studies in it. So we can share that link as well if you want to see some of the research that's been done. But the first one is GenAI Can Harm Learning was really interesting because what it found is that when students were given essentially two versions of ChatGPT, one in which that it was like just the normal version that would give you the answers, and one that was guardrail, that when students were given ChatGPT that would give them the answers, their learning declined. And so the students were using these as a crutch. And that was what everyone focused on, because also literally the title of the thing is GenAI Can Harm Learning. But what they found is that when it was an application that had been designed to actually support students to work through the answers to like a more of a pedagogical approach, that learning loss was eliminated. And so the idea here is like, that is why I think organizations that are like tech organizations like Brisk are doing the right thing in the sense of creating spaces in which these tools are pedagogically are becoming more and more pedagogical with the limitations that they have today just because of the technology itself. But it is interesting how loud it was. It's bad for learning. But it actually is like the design intention and the way it's actually implemented matters a lot more. So if you look at this one, and by the way, everybody, when you talk about peer-reviewed journals, never talk about this study with like a researcher, because it is not a good study, but it became very popular because it was done by like MIT. And what they did is they hooked kids up to an MRI, and they asked them to either write an essay in 20 minutes, use Google and write an essay in 20 minutes, or use ChatGPT and write an essay in 20 minutes. And what they found is that the students that used ChatGPT had less cognitive load and less ownership. And that's all anyone focused on. But then when the kids actually pre-wrote their essays and the time allotted, and then use AI, the generative AI, to like support their work, that learning loss was collapsed. And also kids had higher ownership again. It was a different type of activity than just writing, absolutely. So the cognitive work was different, but it still was cognitive work in a meaningful way, which I thought was really interesting. And the last one, I know we have an international audience, is that when in Nigeria, when there were a 6-week program where young people were able to come on and have a tutor with an adult tutor that was going to help the tutor actually improve their tutoring around math, that the students actually saw amazing learning gains. And so these are types of studies I think that are really encouraging about what can happen with the right intentionality. But also I think that everything today around ed tech and generative AI, or tech and generative AI, is about how the tools are designed and implemented, because that's really going to be the absolute most important thing. Because we can't, if we just give kids fettered access to this technology without any AI literacy or support, that's when we're going to start to see more cognitive offload and potential harm that's had. So I'll cut off here because I know we're transitioning to the next section. But if there's any questions, I know there's a lot of questions that are happening. But I do think that this is what we think a lot about. Like, this is what we think about AI literacy, why we think it's important. And then I know we're going to have a little bit of time about roadmaps and some of our resources around policy and adoption as well.
Perfect. So I think that's one of the questions that I did see in the chat is, when we're thinking about AI literacy and people are wondering, where does the importance of literacy fit into all of this?
Well, I mean, I think that general literacy is just a core function of everything, right? It's very hard to have AI literacy without literacy, because the ways in which we communicate with generative AI are through speech and text, right? And so it is going to require us to be able to not only communicate, evaluate outputs that are heavily text-based, but also to be able to craft a question or feedback in a way that can be understood by a generative AI system, right? And I think that requires an enormous amount of not just literacy. I would say pushing further out, it's not just literacy, it's critical thinking, it's analytical thinking, it is going to be resilience, problem solving, questioning technique, all of those things, which of course are part and parcel, to literacy development itself, but those are absolutely integral to someone having not just Gen AI literacy, but fluency as well. Like, can I use this tool in a meaningful way that I get to exactly what I want, or maybe even something I didn't think possible? Requires all of those like durable skills as well as literacy itself.
Well, thank you. It's just helpful to have that clarity there and just to be able to respond to some of the questions. I think we've had a lot of great webinar conversation in the chat here and lots of great conversations and all of that taking place. I know for me, like when I've been watching students use AI myself, and I'll just refer to my own two kids, I've watched them not use AI to necessarily like generate something for the sake of doing the work for them. But for example, I've seen both of my kids be able to use AI as a way to get feedback, just like you were talking about. And I think what's happening in our schools is that so many people are adopting tools, and we know that in classrooms, teachers are using those tools already. And so I think that oftentimes what we see then is that leaders are trying to scramble to keep up. And okay, if the teachers are using these tools, are they using them effectively? Are they using them, do we have continuity across the school district or each school itself? And so I think that that's all part of that conversation of AI literacy, where some people want to hold back, they might be fearful, but yet it's already in our classrooms or our students are already using it. In addition to that, I listened to you talk in a podcast talking about how, yes, we need AI literacy in our schools for the adults in the school, the staff, but we also really need it for our students. Is there anything you want to share with that too?
Well, yeah, I think that I mean, it's interesting to see like the poll we did earlier about the strategic use. I'm really interested to understand because one of like how those within the group, and maybe we could do another poll of like, have you introduced student AI literacy and or tools to students? We're seeing more of a focus on tool use for students, meaning like we're giving students access to tools without necessarily doing intentional AI literacy work around it, meaning like, have you done workshops or are the students taking courses? Are they having meaningful conversations about AI literacy? Do they have an on-ramp to AI use themselves? Or are we just providing them access? And I think that this is where it's important for us. And I think that a real opportunity is like, if you're going to implement something with Brisk, like are the parts where the kids are really like trained how to use these tools in meaningful ways is going to be key. And so one of the things that we've done is we've actually changed our mission where we were really focused only on teachers. But when we saw that there was less work being done with students, we've actually expanded our mission to include student AI literacy. And we are launching a free high school and a free early college course for students in November. And so if you are interested, to be honest, it's really cool. It's about like learning about AI, but it also is things like, how do I create my own academic code? How can we understand how to use this for my own learning gaps, creativity, my own feedback? Like that's a really big part. So we're trying to support that. But I do think that to Lowell has a question about like the idea of AI competencies. For us, we're going to include that in the C framework, but also one of the things to consider is that there's almost two levels of AI literacy. There's AI literacy and there's AI skills. And I think this is where it gets really interesting because a lot of the federal push right now is around AI skills. Like, can students graduate to build new models, to be the new Sam Altman or Mira, Marathi, but what we think is that AI literacy can be for everybody, but then those students that really want to move into AI careers, you can start to have competencies around the skills themselves, around how to build, fine tune, and actually use the model, not use the models, but create the models is something that also is a very exciting next step if you're really thinking about, a portrait of a graduate.
Perfect. Yeah. And I know Portrait of a Graduate is just being widely used more and more, especially in New York State, as you know, as a New York resident yourself, Amanda. All right. So let's kind of do just a bit of a transition now. And what we're going to do is we're going to kick off this section thinking about from policy to practice and really how do we within our schools, let's say we are working towards AI literacy and readiness. How do we then go into policies and guidelines? How do we bring those to life in our schools? And I would love for you to share just how leaders can really build trust and sustainability along the way. I know we don't have a ton of time, and that's a lot to think about. So if you can just kind of share that in a way that also is beneficial for the audience, that would be great.
Absolutely. And so, okay, so everybody, we're going to do a pretty quick deep dive into like how we think about this. And we have a course that's like, this is actually coming directly from our adoption and strategy course that we have for adults. But this is what we think about when we think about a roadmap. So, Elizabeth, it's kind of what you just said, but like, how do you do it all? Well, because this is everybody, this is a change management process. This is a change management process. It's something that is going to take multiple days. Wouldn't it be nice if I said, okay, everybody, here's the magic wand, and you can have AI implemented in days, but multiple steps and stages. But for us, what we think is the most important thing to start building your GenAI roadmap, to have it really move from policy to practice, is to understand why you're implementing generative AI at the district or school level, or if you're in higher education. So, like, what is the why? And I think that often what we feel is that the why is it's here, we need to figure it out, which is it is here. But what we would suggest very strongly is to spend some time understanding the why of it. And I think that this is, you can see like Kathy in the chat and others like Dan Friedman, others that are here that are doing this work, is that we often really push our partners to think about what is the purpose of generative AI for our, is it going to be, we're going to really focus on future ready like students? Is it because we're going to help our teachers provide better quality instructional material? We're going to use it because differentiation is the most important thing we can possibly do. And I think that that is really what's going to happen, where you have a purpose and a why. That why also is something that allows those around you, like your stakeholders, to really latch on to what it is and why, and understand that it's not just a separate priority, but something that's that is being integrated into the vision that has already been established. And I think that is like, yeah. And I think to Mary's point, it seems really easy when you're like, we're just going to do a policy, but it starts to block so many things. So for us, when we think about the timeline is very important, but I'm going to focus on that idea of guidelines versus policy, because we actually, like, the idea of developing real policy or guidelines requires you to do the work of the why. And then not only that, but also like, how will you build like student and teacher awareness? How are you going to implement this? How are you going to ensure that students are not experiencing 5 different types of classrooms in a day because of the different adoption patterns? Like, all of those start to open up. I'm going to guess that you're having these conversations about even what happens when a student is accused of AI cheating, or when a teacher decides to use an AI grader and maybe something isn't like fully checked or something happens. And I think that that's where it really gets really interesting in terms of like the idea of starting to work through these not as individual projects, but as a roadmap. Ideas around resource planning. You've got like so many cool resources that are free or available. You probably have also an enormous, people in this room, for example, that would love to be trainers around this work. And then finally, how are you going to engage? And we would suggest that when we think about something like AI literacy, is that we would suggest it's for everybody, including families and board members, and like even like your community-based organizations working with your organization. And so here's a couple of things that we would suggest to think about before you start doing, like, again, if you want this to be something that is really going to like move more quickly, is like, can you start asking these questions? And I'm going to give you a resource on the next slide that can help out with this. But the first one is like, someone asked about an AI detector. We can come back to that, Amanda. I will definitely come back to that. But what tools are being used and by whom? So that could be an AI detector, could be you're thinking about adopting Brisk and seeing how many people use it. Are students using tools like Quillbot or Character AI? Like, but what's being used and by whom? And then what is the general attitude? Because I know that the people in your school or district or organization that are the most anti-AI and the most positive AI. But there's a whole bunch of people in the middle that you may not know. And it's easy to think that it's one or the other. But I can tell you right now, we have been in rooms 10 people to 1,000 people, and there is always a spectrum from positive to negative, from unsure. Like, there's always that. So being able to actively understand where people are thinking, And so like it definitely can be something that can help you have more understanding of where to focus your attention. The idea of what existing policies and guidelines do you have? So right now, there are 31 states that have some sort of AI guidance for education for K-12. And we have a resource on our site that I can share again, but that has all of those linked. So do they already exist, or they already are? For example, if you have friends in the chat like Lucia and others that already have policies, like they can absolutely share them as well. You don't have to start from scratch, and we have other resources as well. But I'm gonna share a couple. Are there other initiatives that you can kind of actually bring together where it's something that can be in addition to and not additive? Oh, sorry. Lucia, I did better this time. Thank you for correcting me. But we also have this idea of like, what would it need for the leadership to be a support? So I'm going to say, if you're not a leader and you're listening to this, how are you going to have the leadership like actually get to them and have them really be interested in moving with you? And so how are you going to build like those processes? And and so Kayla, I'm going to say, oh no, I can't say names anymore because I'm going to be wrong. But the idea of North Carolina's guidance, and in fact, I'm going to show you a resource that we co-developed with Vera from North Carolina, but there's some great stuff out there that already exists. And then finally, we've got also that current technology infrastructure. In some cases, the technology within your schools and district might not allow you to really start to adopt generative AI as much as you want to because of bandwidth issues, because of technology considerations. So it's something important to understand. So here's one of our resources. It's a QR code. It's a very simple resource. I'll drop it in the chat. You can still see my window, right, Elizabeth? Okay, we can still see. If you want to I'm a researcher at heart, so this is designed to be as easy as possible. All you need to do is download the PDF. And then what we've done is we've created 2 surveys that are going to be, all you need to do is make a copy. And it's a very basic 2-minute survey that is both for students and teachers that goes over how people use it, what they use, as well as what their concerns and opportunities are. And I think that is really where we find this, like you can learn so much. And I promise you'll be surprised by both your teacher and your student answers. We even have prompts in our prompt library that could help you actually like do the analysis. But before I'm going to go shop one more resource. This is the guidance. So it includes the North Carolina guidance that those in the chat were talking about. So you can always go here. We try to update it every time there's a new piece. The next piece is if you're really thinking about what you want to do is we have policies versus guidelines. I will be honest, we tend to focus our work more on guideline development because we like guidelines because they can be living documents. They are mindset focused and oriented, and they're also a learning opportunity. Meaning that you can put in all of these great opportunities. But Elizabeth, you want to say something? Yes, I come off.
Oh, I was just going to comment when you were done, just that I really love this table. Just breaking down the difference between the policies and the guidelines, because I think those can very much get blurred within a district. So I think this visual is really beneficial for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. And so, and what you'll notice is when we talk to leaders, we do suggest dating policy. So like these policies, we would update. We wouldn't necessarily write a new policy. What we would rather you do is get the board to approve a set of guidelines. And then this is really where it really comes in, right? Like the idea that then it can be about, it's essentially we use guidelines as AI literacy drivers. We use them as mindset drivers. We include a vision. We talk about what generative AI is. We talk about resources. We talk about tool vetting, like, okay, let's say that you have Brisk. This is why we chose it. And this is how you use it. And this is what we're going to do. And like, here's the pilot we're doing. This is something that can be so helpful, right? Because then it's something that, it gets you to a place where you're not stuck. There's not this one thing. And I think that this is absolutely, yes. So like, and to Raquel, absolutely. So you didn't change it, but you actually moved it in. I would say like a parenthetical. I would suggest any leader here, just in terms of protection. In an academic integrity policy and acceptable use policy, I would include at least a parenthetical. It says emerging technology and generative AI, just to be extra special safe because of what we are seeing actually happening when students are accused of AI cheating. But we really this is great. And what we consider also, you see how it can also be ones that are not just about your educators. It could be teachers, staff. And we actually do suggest very strongly that there's like a guidelines for everybody, but then there's for students, for leaders, for teachers, for like that, there's even for families. And so I'm going to give you a couple of pieces that are kind of it's almost like if this is your big thing, these are kind of the smaller ways that you can think about this. And these are two of our pieces that we do. And you talked about North Carolina. So this is Vera Cabrera, who was the architect of the North Carolina guidance. A lot of our stuff, including this, is in the actual North Carolina guidance. But we worked together to create this every framework, which is going to be about, and I think this is appropriate for students and teachers, the idea that you're constantly evaluating, verifying, and revising is going to be incredibly important. But when it comes down to it, that you, at the end, is that generative AI, if it makes a mistake, it's still down to you having evaluated it, gotten feedback, or decided not to use the outputs because you did not have the expertise required to review them. And I think that this is where it's going to be like very important going forward. Yeah, so it's very simple though, but what we see is sometimes you just post this up, right? But it really is about your responsibility using generative AI. And then what teacher does not love a decision tree? We love a decision tree. You can tell that I was a teacher. And then like this is like definitely where we can just say like, here's a simple matrix of how to start thinking about when AI use is appropriate. What you'll notice is we don't shy away from things like hallucinations or bias. We talk about disclosure. We talk about permission. We talk about even picking the right tool, because like research is not just about finding sources. It's about finding the awesome, Dustin. We have so much stuff on our website, Dustin. So I hope you find these. We have other things. These are just two of the easier ones. And I'm just going to go back and I'll drop these links in. So all of our stuff, if you're like, our website is AI for Education. This is where we have our free course. We have webinars. We have a prompt library. So you can just cut and paste these into ChatGPT and get a good first prompt. But the ones that I'm talking about right now that include even a policy, like they actually have a one-page policy you could rewrite, as well as an actual guide to writing a policy and also to developing a roadmap. All of that's here. And I know people are asking about climate. We also have a climate discussion guide and a deepfake discussion guide. So all of this is going to be in there. It's all free. We're going to be doing a lot more, everybody. So get ready because we're actually going to have a little bit more time. But I do think that something like this, what we like about it is that while this is big, this is tactical. This is immediate impact. And I think that that's where we get excited. So I think I did pretty good. I think we still have time for questions. But I think the most important thing before we just go back is that it's a process. No, even if you took one of these things, like just the guidelines, you're most likely going to have to take a step back and actually think about the larger change management process. There's really not a good, it's going to change so much of our lives in schooling and life that to look at it from a strategic lens is going to just be really important. And the more that you do that now, the more you're going to be able to actually really create the space for it to move from policy to practice.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate all of those insights and also you fitting it into this time span that we have together. I know that these are topics that you go into depth with when you work with school districts, and there really is a lot that you can share. Now, I'm trying to keep up with some of the questions that we had in here. One of the ones that I did see, and please, if you're in the chat right now, feel free to drop questions in here. We will be sharing out resources, so I'll come back to that in just a bit. Let me see if I can go back to this one. I know I saw one up here. Should we be looking at AI as here to stay and to start to develop and teach research integrity?
Oh, I think, yeah. So I think that, the way that we talk about generative AI is going to be more similar to the internet and the literally electricity than it is going to be some kind of application or device. And so more and more generative AI is going to be integrated into pretty much everything that you do, whether that is going to be your phone. Your phone will have it probably already has generative AI in it if you've updated it, your new computer, Alexas, and all of those. And also you're going to start to see more and more of other tools that you use within your schools already have generative AI built in or building generative AI in. And so the more that we can understand that not only are these is generative AI here to stay, but it's going to be improving as well. And also we have like absolutely going to be moving to a situation in which, there are going to be a number of applications that are going to start changing the ways that we communicate, the ways that we work, we learn, et cetera. I would also say something to also consider is that it is going to be like very, very real that jobs are going to both be augmented, replaced, and created. And so one of the things to consider is that, ChatGPT is less than 3 years old, but AI literacy is the top rising skill on LinkedIn this year. And so if under 3 years, AI literacy is the top new skill for hireability at this very early stage, then we absolutely know it's going to be integral moving forward. So the more that we can build these safe, ethical, and effective, approaches, then the better off our students going to be. So for research, identifying that not all research is created equally, right? It's just not all created equally. It is going to be, and I think that is something that's really important, and that not only is not all research created equally, but if you use generative AI incorrectly, you might actually be using fake research. And I think that like the idea that generative AI doesn't go and search, but it creates, means that you can be in a situation where you'll be like, oh my gosh, this amazing 19th century female Peruvian scientist that didn't actually exist as a human because generative AI made it up based on the question you asked. So those types of ideas are going to be important. And the idea of everything, it's funny, people are like, when do you talk about ethics? We talk about ethics every day, all the day. Like there's no way to talk about AI literacy without talking about ethics.
Yeah, and that's actually, there'll be a topic that'll come up in one of our later webinar episodes. So everybody keep in mind, we will be having 6 additional webinars. So I'll share more about that in just a minute. Before I do that, Amanda, one thing I'd like to just ask you myself too, and just for everybody in the audience, I'd love to hear about how can leaders keep adoption plans future ready as AI tools and just AI in general continues to evolve. Because I think what happens in education, and just myself from being an educator, and my husband's in education as well, there's so much that comes down to educators, and there are so many different things to keep up with. So as everything evolves, what are some tips that you would provide to leaders?
I mean, I think the most important thing is it's not too late. I hate to rhyme. It's not too late, but I wouldn't wait in the sense of starting to think through the applications. I think that, it's incredibly important to be intentional. One of the things that I think is a bit of a misnomer is the idea that like using an AI tool equates to AI literacy. And I mean that for both students, teachers, leaders, like that, like the intentional application and understanding of these tools is very important. And so creating this space, I think is just so important. I just think like it needs to be a priority before, like if you're not prioritizing AI literacy and foundational AI literacy by the 2026 school year, then I think it will be too late because the technology will be so heavily integrated. And also some of the really unique opportunities of today is that the tools are still in development and make a lot of mistakes and are kind of weird, that like it makes it easier to learn about them, but also it starts to establish a real base of how important human judgment and like the human like part of our lives and skills are going to be so important because the technology is only going to get better and better. So I think that those are the things. And also you don't have to start huge. There are 31 states with guidance. There are resources. There's the learning that you guys are doing, everything. Like you don't have to start small. But I do think that the only thing I'm going to say is we have a lot of leaders come to us and say, we built a set of guidelines or a policy or we did PD, but like we also have to make sure that it's a strategy. That if we just do one of those, it ends up like leading to more questions and answers. So if it's something that we take a step back and think about the strategy and either partnering with organizations like us or others, I think that this is going to be really important because I get a lot of people that come to us, including like yesterday. We thought we had it nailed. And then you know what happened? We had so much more buy-in and then I went off the rails completely. Right. And I think that is because they weren't prepared for, even though there was buy-in, there'd be these big questions that have to be really thoughtfully like supported. Otherwise, what can happen is it can absolutely end up being a lot of people upset because they feel like this is a scary, big, uncertain moment, and those feelings have nowhere to go. And so I think the last thing I'll say is psychological safety is incredibly important. And I think that that is going to be something that, like, creating spaces for this to be safe and transparent and open as a leader is going to make all the difference.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think especially just involving students in those conversations too, because I think oftentimes we don't necessarily want to have the conversation with students, or we don't feel comfortable or confident. But yeah, our students are oftentimes using AI, and we can add their voice into any of the work that we're doing. So I think that's always really important too. For anybody looking for additional resources, I do want to share with you that we will have additional episodes that will be airing from the Brisk Innovators webinar series. So we're really excited. We're going to be highlighting responsible AI leadership, building trust, and guardrails for districts. We're going to have Armand Jaffer, the CEO and founder of Brisk, on, and he's going to be joined alongside Ken Shelton. So I'm really excited about that conversation. It's going to be a quick 30-minute webinar. Keep in mind that you can always connect with Brisk on social. You'll see us at Brisk Teaching, and you can always go to briskteaching.com. You also will have in here all of our safety and privacy. Brisk is safe and secure. There's a 93% safety rating, privacy rating with Common Sense Media. And we are COPPA, FERPA compliant, and GDPR if you are overseas. So just keep that in mind as you are using Brisk or checking that out. And really for any AI, we do want to make sure, regardless of what tool you're using, that you are using tools safely, responsibly, and especially when you're talking about with students. So, Amanda, we are so appreciative for you to take time out of your crazy busy schedule. We are honored to have you joining us here today. Just the insights you have, all of the beautiful resources. So thank you so much for helping us just to talk about how we can navigate AI in our school districts.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the chat. We appreciate everybody. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day or evening.
Yes. And thank you, everybody. I see all the thanks in the chat. So again, we just want to thank everybody here too. We will be sending recording, resource links. We will have resources from Brisk, and we'll also include any resources from Amanda as well. So until next time, keep leading with what's next. Thanks, everybody.